function, gender diversity and inclusion function. So WISE is a vibrant community that champions and supports all women in CGIAR, regardless of their role, so that they realize their full potential. Our vision is that all CGIAR women are visible, their voices heard, and their contributions recognized. Now, our mission involves promoting professional development for our members, making tools, knowledge sharing, and events available, and helping forge connections and build networks that would advance their careers. How have we been delivering on our mission so far? In October 2022, we launched 2 promising programs to support women in CGIAR, Random Coffee and the Mentorship Program, 2 key programs. We are seeing an increasing uptake of these programs, and we do encourage you to enroll in you if you haven't, my dear friend. In addition, we have run 2 all-staff webinars in 2023 titled, How Can Women Role Model Success in February, and Overcoming Limiting Beliefs, also in March, which received very positive feedback. And in May, we will be kicking off a series of career development workshops for women in CGIAR2. I want to make it very clear, because we've had the question before. Yes, anyone can join WISE, both men and women, researchers and non-researchers. We welcome everyone at CGIAR as long as you support our vision. In the spirit of continuous improvement and adoption, the WISE Employee Resource Group, led resource group, also conducted a series of 3 focus groups to better understand the unique challenges of women in CGIAR in March 2023. The goal of these focus groups was to understand the unique experiences, challenges, and aspirations among women in CGIAR. Here are some of our top line key findings. 1, the women who participated shared that they have seen an increased focus on GDI across CGIAR and have recognized that there is now a broader range of development opportunities, from WISE mentorship programs to Random Coffee. This was reassuring to hear, and WISE will definitely be focusing on amplifying these programs in partnership with the GDI function. On the other hand, there were barriers that women in CGIAR faced that limit their progression, such as the lack of flexible working arrangements and inequitable access to career support. We recognize that these barriers are not only unique to CGIAR, but to other research organizations around the world. And if we want to better understand how to break down these barriers, we need to address them the same way we would any scientific challenge, by leveraging on evidence, data, and research. Thus, we at WISE are grateful to have Dr. Millicent Liani, my colleague from IITA, to share with us about her research on breaking down barriers to gender-equitable scientific career progression in Africa. Millicent is a gender research scientist based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Prior to joining IITA, She was a doctoral research fellow with the Developing Excellence in Leadership, Training and Science in Africa, Deltas Africa initiative, where she led the learning research program on equitable career pathways, while at the Center for Capacity Research, Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine in UK. She completed her PhD dissertation titled Exploring the Barriers and Enablers to Gender-Equitable Scientific Career Pathways in the Deltas-funded African Research Institutions. Previously, Millicent worked for ICRISAT and ILRI as a gender research associate. She has academic disciplinary training background in anthropology and gender studies, with a professional diploma in human resource development, Institute of Commercial Management, UK. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now hand over to Millicent. She is the right person to deliver this talk. Millicent, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parks, and welcome everyone to this webinar. I want to introduce myself because Elizabeth has already done that. So just in relation to our theme for today is really to understand how we break down the barriers to gender-equitable scientific career pathways in Africa, and reflecting what does that mean even in relation to what goes on within our CGI centers. So I'll basically go through, provide an overview about the study itself, where it was nested, the objective, the methods I used, and share some of the findings and recommendations. So the Deltas program, which is the Developing Excellence Leadership Training and Science in Africa, I happen to be a fellow of that program from the year 2016 to 2021. And this was a child research capacity strengthening program that was aimed at strengthening the research career training, as well as building equitable career progression pathways for researchers to actually become competitive internationally in Africa and then global. And within that program, I was affiliated to the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, specifically in the Center for Capacity Research, which was mandated to document evidence alongside the Deltas Africa to really understand, garner the learnings that will now kind of provide insights to the program in order to actually adjust their research capacity strengthening program. So while into that, I actually led the study, I commissioned a study around the barriers and enablers to gender-equitable scientific career pathways within the Deltas Africa research institutions. And you might ask yourself, why is this important? Of course, we all know that science is at the heart of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and gender equity is one of the cross-cutting perspectives if you look at it in terms of the SDGs. And of course, having inclusive societies is also a mandate within, and the institution is a mandate within the SDGs. And you look at it globally, studies around the scientific research occupations, it's evident that compared to men, the progression of women into scientific career pathway, you look at it, the men tend to really progress faster, especially getting on to the senior scientific positions compared to the women. And a peculiar bit around it, you find that if you look at it for those who are the bachelors or even at the with the master's degrees working as research associate research officers, you find there's kind of a slightly higher number of women at 53%. But once you move into doctorate, you find now the number is dropping. You see there's the leaking, the pipeline is leaking. And once they finish the PhD, the numbers of women now in scientific research careers, there's that diminishing. And globally, UNESCO has shown that 28% of researchers are women. And Sub-Saharan Africa is still happens to be the region that has the lowest number of women in scientific, particularly at 16%. And looking at the Wellcome Trust Basic Science Career Tracker, and this is in relation to the Deltas because it was funded by the Wellcome Trust, the UK Wellcome Trust and the UK. You find that for them, 48% of the women who have undergone training, we find that after the PhDs, only just 48 who are still into scientific research compared to 93% of women. And so how do we actually be able to understand these issues, the problem better? We recognize that gender parity in numbers, which denotes equality, the bit on the left, is mainly the evidence that is commonly used within institutions to really show how institutions are committed towards enhancing, let's say, like women into scientific research careers. Of course, that's a good starting point in terms of showing actually the numbers out there. But of course, in order to inform action for positive change, for equitable career progression, there's need to really go beyond not just looking at the numbers to actually understand some of the underlying reasons that are really leading into different experiences and processes that are creating inequities within the scientific research careers. And basically within this study, the main overarching aim was actually for me to gather evidence, empirical evidence, that could actually be used to improve research career equity for African researchers, while acknowledges researchers have multiple social identities. And in that, I focused mainly on understanding some of the individual experiences around themselves as individuals, the family, the society, and then moving on into the institutions where they work in. How does that, what are the experiences around the institutional environment, and how does that shape inequities into their career progression? And beyond that, I went further to really understand what are some of the strategies that institutions were using to actually promote gender equitable career progression, and also getting recommendations from the researchers themselves, the participants who are the researchers at different career stages, to really get to garner what are the desired actions for change that actually need to be done to get it right within the institutions to enhance equitable career progression. And basically, this study was qualitative. I did it as a cross-sectional study, and I focused on 3 deltas research consortia. There were 11 in total, but I focused on 3 and selected one that was based in the West and Central Africa, one in Southern Africa, and the one in East Africa. And I mainly used in-depth interviews with the study participants, and these are the researchers at different career stages, and that was complemented by key informant interviews and document review on the reports that were submitting annually around how they are enhancing equitable career progression. And just a glimpse to show you how where the 11 research consortia were located. Of course, the 11 research consortia operate having a mix of 54 research institutions in Africa. So each consortia had partners, and the host partners were research institutions. So in the West, I focused on one that was based in Senegal, the Malaria Research Capacity Strengthening Development Program. There's one in Southern Africa, the Sub-Saharan Network of TB and HIV, which is based in at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And then in Kenya, the Capacity Strengthening Initiative by Wellcome Trust, the Cambridge Wellcome Trust, around initiative to develop African research leaders. And the sample size, I spoke to 58 researchers at different career stages. We had those at master's, PhD, early career researchers, the postdoc, the mid-career, and the senior researchers. And alongside that, I conducted key informant interviews, and these were mainly with the institutional research leaders, the program managers, people who are into the M&D and the coordinators of the program. And these 58 participants, of course, they came from 13 sub-Saharan Africa, as spelled out in this. We had like 4 coming from 4 countries in Eastern Africa, 3 from Southern Africa, and 5 countries from West and Central Africa. So maybe before I preempt, just to really get share findings around what are those institutional level drivers I found out, I would really like us to go into the chat and just answer this question by asking ourselves, what do you think are the institutional level obstacles that impede women's equitable scientific career progression? So if you could just take like 1 minute and post into the chat your response in relation to what do you think are some of the institutional level obstacles that impedes women's equitable scientific career progression in science. Awen, you could help me monitor the chat.
I am monitoring the chat. So, and we're not talking about CGIR here, are we? We're talking about just sort of general institutional level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Edwin's asking if you can elaborate what's an institutional level.
These are the challenges that we experience within the institution, is within the workplace environment. That's what we mean.
Okay, so we've got started. So we've got Anna's saying biases in how superiors perceive and evaluate women's scientific contributions. I've added a lack of flexible time to accommodate home and work commitments. Elizabeth's added stereotypes against women leading. And Paula, not enough policies to be flexible with studying and working and home life as well.
Interesting.
Oh, now they're starting to come through thick and fast. So the lack of balance between family work and study, disadvantages in connecting to scientific networks, lack of transparency in promotions and progression, barriers, too few women in the field, a bit more difficult to bond and co-create solutions with men only. So yeah, a wide variety of institutional barriers there.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for the content into the chat. We'll analyze that later. So just to give a glimpse around some of the institution level drivers that I gathered from this study. One of it, the theme was really more around the science itself as requiring really time commitment beyond the core working hours, and which the women and especially the men felt this science itself as a career, it's actually a steeper hill for women to climb. And it's a steeper hill for women themselves to really climb, or climbing, it's moving up the career, progressing up the career ladder into the senior scientific. Because science, juggling the science career and the family, sometimes it really becomes hard for women. And women tend to kind of establish their scientific research careers when they're in 30s. And within the 30s, that's the time when they're also attending to their reproductive roles. And for those who are mainly perhaps unmarried, that's when the biological clock is also ticking. So you find during that particular time, these women managing these two different lives. They do two different lives, is the life of you having the family and the other life with the scientific research career. Sometimes it really becomes tedious, and for them, they came up with a metaphor, which they say, in this sense scheme, a woman has two balls. One is the rubber ball, and the rubber ball is mainly the family. In that, the rubber ball, sorry, it's mainly the career itself. That career, sometimes you can just drop it to leave it. It will sometimes bounce back into your life. You could pick it, or you could move into another career path later. But the family was actually built to be like a glass ball, which sometimes, if you kind of prioritize your career over that, if you break it as a glass, it will actually break, and that your family will be done. And this, of course, was meant to seen as really creating scientific productivity puzzles in terms of the paper writing, grant writing, especially for the women who have these other lives that they are living around the family. And they say that maybe for those who are in dual scientific relationship, and for dual scientific, these are couples who are all scientists, who are all scientific researchers, that sometimes it's easier for women who are in such kind of relationship, because the male spouse, sometimes they end up supporting them in terms of doing the paper writing and even doing the grant writing. And there's, of course, the juggling, the science career, and having this aspect of the time commitment. They say within science, you have to kind of be ready to pack and go anytime. And this is mainly happens, especially for those at the early career stages, because geographical mobility and all that, that's when you're traveling, getting the networks and building yourself, your niche into your career for you to move up. And that means that they have less scientific mobility, getting into the weak social capital. And that really boils down into them experiencing poor life balance. And just a glimpse from the quotes that came out from this, you find that they're saying science is never going to be easy, especially if you're a married woman. And this is a man who is saying that it's a steeper hill for women to climb. And in the interest of their scientific research career progression, sometimes you have to make sacrifice. And one said that there is no relationship, there is no work-life balance in science. Like for this lady who was a mid-career researcher, say that for her, the relationship went through, as in the relationship, they couldn't work out. And this one was actually into a non-dual scientific career nature of partnership. And moving on into everyday experiences and practices within the institution, we found around aspects around gender and disciplinary stereotyping. And just to give a glimpse at the researchers who were participating into this help, we had the biomedical researchers and the social scientists, with the biomedical researchers accounting to close to 80% of the study participants. So for them, especially the social scientists, they felt like sometimes they are perceived as minorities within the institution, big marginalized, and people just look at it, the work you do is just an add-on into what the basic scientists are doing. And in relation to just even women being at workplace, you know, having like discussions, it could be work discussions around their work. In some instances, the men will treat it as if they're just having gossip time, which is not, they felt that that was really stereotyping them within the institution. And then there was a challenge around the unconscious gender biases at workplace, where sometimes if you're working within a research group, your PI, the principal investigator, looks at it and they're like, oh, maybe you came in as a woman, you get pregnant, and then within the next year, you also come pregnant. So they put that clause that keep reminding you that please don't get pregnant within this project. The project is there for 3 years, 4 years, and then you come in within the cycle, you kind of, you know, become expectant twice. So they felt that is not really good. And this was actually used as a bias even in terms of them recruiting, and especially for those in the junior and early career stages. And there's sexual harassment, bullying, and intimidation. And this was, the sexual harassment was mainly the physical, I think coercion, and sometimes, you know, that's kind of physical thing in terms of, if you do this for me, I will, you know, I will give you like a promotion. And this is something that for them, they didn't want to speak more detail into it. And they say, we'll speak about it when you're out of that institution. That's when, because there's no really confidential way of really treating issues around sexual harassment, bullying, and intimidation. And there was also the challenge around inequitable access to support systems within institution. And this boiled down to insufficient mentorship, and the insufficiency in mentorship came in relation to the lack of the psychosocial mentorship. Yes, the career mentorship bit kind of matching the researchers to different researchers who have really made up into their careers to provide kind of the career support, and the mentorship was there. But in terms of the psychosocial mentoring, getting someone to really get to understand the inner who you are, that is what was really lacking. And this, it also brought into the lack of female role models, with one person saying, but I really don't see any successful, powerful, you know, women who are into the senior scientific positions, like even research directors, who are still like married. And this boils down to which ball do you want to drop? Because there are few who say they could be able to balance the rubber and the glass. But most others will say you first have to get one ball. Once the other ball is somewhere, that's when you move on into the other ball. And there's also the lack of institutional support for women researchers, especially those with nursing needs, where you find that in some institutions, they complain that there was lack of lactation rooms. You find that you are sharing an office, there's nowhere even to express your milk. People have to go to the bathrooms, which are unhygienic. And even when you express the milk into the bathrooms, you come and even there's no like a special refrigerator for women with nursing needs. They end up putting the baby milk into the normal refrigerator where people come and put it, which it wasn't really good for them. And then dissatisfaction in the role of flexi-time, I think that also came to the chart, where they said that there's not really formal procedure or SOPs onto that. What is this? Just for you to have a formal arrangement with the supervisor. But this formal arrangement mainly works for those who are already in the mid-career or senior. But for those who are in early career juniors, will barely see them, you know, kind of asking their supervisor for flexi-time. And in relation to the nature of science career, which requires research funding to sustain researchers within institutions and their work, they say that the science career itself is really a scary career. And looking at it in terms of the competitive and even the insecure and working environment, in terms of even when you do the grant writing, and most of these grants come from the global north countries, they say sometimes unless you have a PI or unless you have a co-applicant who is white applying as an African researcher, you are likely not to get that grant. And within that, those issues around the ageism, you find that even those, you have those old, I would say, researchers who've really made up into their careers with still being supportive within the institution, but they can't even give those changes, even to those who are like in the mid or early careers, such as to actually lead a grant and then support them to actually put on that grant when it's aspect of when it comes to application. And this also goes on in terms of the issue now of the positional hierarchy within the institution. At which point are you in your career and how do you relate that within who in order for you to actually get that particular grant or even be included into that lucrative grant writing process. And down to that, those perspective that science is actually a precarious career where that it's more means the short-term contracts, which provides a sense of job insecurity, financial instability, and which is really inappealing. And beyond this, I ask about what are some of the current mechanisms within the institutions that are being used to actually enhance this equitable career progression. One of it, mainly around the individuals themselves, is time to kind of exercise individual agency for them making up their own decision on whether they'll be able to balance the two balls, whether they'll have to defy one ball to balance to take up the other ball first. And that's some of the mechanisms that they will use. But of course, they're going back into the issues of unconscious bias stereotype. Some, especially the male researchers in the institution, they'll ask you, maybe you're in your mid-30s, you finish your PhD, maybe you're in your postdoc, why are you still unmarried? It means no one is eyeing you, like such things. So they felt those are the things, but of course that unconscious bias is still within the workplace. And then there was a mentorship scheme, and just as I said, career mentorship was in all but psychosocial. It was just some institutions that had that particular element. Aspects around the work-life balance, we had some institutions that really had departments that are really focused around work-life discussion, and they'll have these discussion panels at workplace where they even get advice in even how to manage their time within the work, and they felt this was really great in terms of fostering peer-to-peer support. And for some, they also had these dedicated programs, departments within the institutions where they even kind of admonish people working over the weekend and actually encourage researchers to engage into recreational activity like exercise, at least to ease them out from that. And of course, all the leaders who are leading the Deltas program, majority of whom were men, were considered kind of the pro-family in terms of the way they were kind of, sympathetic around the needs of the women, and they would actually go into that. Some also provided the bridge fund, especially for those who a contract ends and then you don't know what's going to happen next because you applied for a grant, perhaps it hasn't gone through. So they'll provide like a 1 or 2 year bridge fund just to at least support you as you keep thinking about what your next step. And some centers, and I think these were just 2 institutions, they had this provision of providing childcare support while on duty travel. If you have a child, some will be, if you have a baby who is 1 year or 2 year, they'll actually pay for you and your nanny to travel when you are also on the duty travel, at least to make you be easy as you undertake your everyday scientific research activities. And of course, the support with the networking and collaboration, this was actually the mandate of the capacity, the Delta's capacity strengthening. So they had that travel grant at least to make the researchers visible globally. And in relation to asking them, beyond this, what is it that they actually needs to change, actually needs to happen in order to enhance equitable career progression? So at individual societal level, they call for a need actually to have leadership training for researchers at all career stages, at least to build the confidence, the agencies, and empower them, at least to really be able to make decisions on what is it that they really want. With what they're working on. And then, of course, this question around women, when they are traveling, you know, the society asks this woman keeps on, especially for those who are in non-dual scientific careers. Maybe you are a husband, is in finance, you are into science, you are the woman who keeps on traveling, you know, globetrotting. The questioning, why do you keep on traveling? So at least to have community public engagement around what scientists actually do. And moving on into the institutional level, where I want to really emphasize those actually need to actually build and nurture supportive research community by having open dialogues where researchers open up, you know, just to share experiences on how the everyday experiences and how they're navigating that. And that was due to actually be useful in terms of enhancing peer-to-peer support within the institution. And this is not just having open dialogue, it's having those safe spaces for women to actually engage into that. And of course, the structured mentorship program, and this is the mentorship that is accompanying both the career and psychosocial, and structured in a way that you don't just choose the mentors for the researchers. It's the researchers who should actually have the voice in knowing who should actually be their mentors in terms of the matching. And in terms of making the workplace actually inclusive for everyone, those need at least to have those formal standard operating procedures on even how to undertake the flexi time. And this is SOPs to actually cover everyone from the junior, early careers, mid-career, and even senior careers. So just as I said, these tended to really favor those who are into the senior. And of course, the provision of the childcare support by having, you know, kind of the lactation room within the workplace, and also for those that are not providing the childminder support while on duty travel. And looking at it in terms of the pipeline, the leaking and attrition of women into the senior scientific, there's call to have really better representation of women in scientific leadership. And this was thought to actually be meant that it would actually lead to better reshaping of the institutional cultures, especially around the gender diversity and the inclusion of the workplace. And the program level, and these are the program because this was a capacity strengthening program, there's actually need to train supervisors, especially on how to detect and even be able to deal with unconscious biases that come out even when they are recruiting and even when they are working within like a research group. Remember when they tell you you should not get pregnant within the project cycle. And then embracing the virtual capacity program. Of course, this study I did before COVID, the virtual capacity program, we've seen this now working when COVID kicked in. And in terms of just the science, the aspect around the time commitment and all these around, you know, women not really knowing. There's the time around defining scientific research. For those who live like the mainstream scientific research, which entails the paper writing and the grant writing. If people move into program management within scientific research institution, does that mean you've left science? So it's all around the discussion around rethinking those alternative career pathways, just what the women really feel it's easy for them to actually have that work-life balance in relation to what they really feel comfortable, they really want. And for the funding agencies, there was actually need to really have this competitive calls just for women. If it's a call, it has just to be for women compete amongst themselves, not women competing with the men around that particular funding call. And then in relation to the institutions, there was this to actually also have requests for a gender and diversity budget as part of the funding proposal when they're doing that. And this relates to some of which institutions could actually collect this diversity data because the diversity changes. I might be today, I do not have a child, tomorrow I'll be having a 1 or 2 year. So that's diversity data helps to actually foster and make the workplace inclusive in terms of even putting in its a creche. It's also even just having those lactation rooms and even support, especially for those who are on duty travels with the young children. And of course, for those who portray the aspect of the sexual harassment, bullying, those actually called to actually have those sanctions from those PIs so that the grant is taken away from them. It's given to another person and then that grantee is left without that. So just in my lighter, just in relation to this, if we reflect within our centers, I would just like to know perhaps what actions would you like to see implemented within your centers to enhance women's equitable career progression in science? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm monitoring the chat and maybe also writing my own in at the same time. So I'll give everybody a few minutes to write them in.
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay.
Now we have 30 seconds.
Well, I put mine in.
What actions would you really like to see implemented in your own centers to actually see equitable progression of women into scientific research areas?
Okay, so we've got the idea of grants. Godios is appreciating that idea of grants for women, and Elizabeth suggesting if the office could support gender issues, that's good. And budget, incentives for the women. For male scientists, anti-bias training to break the unconscious bias. Mentorship programs quarterly. And I must say, with the ones that for myself, I was really curious about that social counselling, which I understand to mean the sort of like not just the career mentoring, but also like trying to see people who look like myself. Early starters. Okay, so we've got lots and lots of thanks, and then also some other ideas coming through here. Flexible working hours and accommodating mothers. Yeah.
Okay.
Clear guidance.
Thank you so much. I think we will capture all that later on.
Yes.
So I just want to say thank you so much, and I just want to acknowledge the Delta's team, IITA, and the WIRES for giving me this opportunity to deliver this webinar today. And if you just need any more insights around this study, there are 5 pieces of publications which you can really get detailed information around this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Millicent. I think if everybody finds the reactions at the bottom, we can give you a big round of applause there. So if people have that function. I was so excited, I have to say, when you mentioned this research, and it's so we're so lucky to have you as an asset in CGIAR. So if anybody wants to open their mic or put a question in the chat, then now is your moment, or even just an observation. There's lots of observations coming through and lots of thanks coming through in the chat. But if anybody also wants to put their hand up, then we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. At the moment, it's just appreciation and thanks coming through to you, Millicent.
Thank you.
Yes, lots of ideas coming through also for young people. Revision of male paternity leave would help working women as well. Yeah, some brilliant ideas coming through in the chat. So let's just move on then. I don't think there are any questions. I wonder if I can take over.
Hi, Arwen. There was actually a good question from Anna.
There was. I'm sorry, because I keep on jumping between different screens. Thank you for spotting it. Maybe you could just read it out for me, Edwin, and take over my role, which I just failed at, please. Thank you.
No problem. So, Millicent, there was a question on, in the spaces where you presented this work, what was the reaction, especially from male senior colleagues when you presented this piece of research to them?
Okay. Thank you so much. So in relation to the reaction, of course, this kind of became an eye-opener. Remember this study, I didn't just focus on the women. I also did interviews with the men. The men actually 45% and the women was 55%. And it's actually side of the male, scientists, they actually look at it and look at the women and like, you women, we respect you with the science, the long working hours, leaving the offices at 9, 10, remember the time commitment, it's doing the writing of the core working hours. So in relation to that, of course, in terms of the institutions, this kind of became an eye opener. I've seen institutions, some of them, they even start changing, having crash at workplace. Some they start even being intentional about having these conversations. You see, like every Thursday, they'll have conversations on the screen boards, kind of bullying, showing like bullying is defined like this and this. And if you participate in an activity like this is how you report it. So it's been able to kind of bring that, and I would say for the funding agency, which is the Wellcome Trust for the Deltas, is a 20-year program. The first phase ended in 2021, 2022. The phase 2, 5-year, commencing this year to 2028. So I happened to be part of the Wellcome Trust advisor in terms of the funding. So providing kind of recommendations on how institutions, even when they're applying for that funding, what they really should actually provide as approved, they're actually enhancing this equitable career progression. And looking at it in terms of even their policies, the issues around the reporting, looking at it, the environment, are they having like those lactation rooms? Are they caring for those even with the younger ones when they are traveling? So that has been able to reshape, and it became kind of I would say, it became kind of a model for the funders in that when you're applying, you need to meet these and these criteria for you to get back. If you don't, you exit that consortium. So they've been looking for other research entities which actually model to that. And I think in this phase 2, there are no longer 11 consortia, it's 14 consortia, 67 African research institutions. So there's that change. And if it comes from the funders, I think institutions
yes, when it comes from the funders, it's very powerful. I see, Anne, you've got your hand up. I think you've also put your question in the chat, but let's have your voice. It's so much nicer.
Sure. No, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. So I'm in human resources, and I see on any given recruitment that we have only 20% of the candidates are typically women that are even applying for roles, for scientific roles. There are some social science areas you might get 30%, but people aren't even applying. And I guess besides some of the things that you mentioned around making it more well-known that we have flexible workplaces. I mean, we do have a lot of creches, we have baby rooms, we have policies that allow people to take their children with them on trips and their caregivers, and they just don't apply. What do you think what do we need to do? Or is it, we've even, the gender language, we stopped using strong, there's all the gender language, and it's just, what do we need to do? 50% of the PhDs are women. Okay. So why are we only getting 20% applicants?
Okay, let me respond to that. And just as I said, I presented some of the findings, not everything. What came out is like when you set up, even in the HR, you put out the adverts, you just say women are highly encouraged to apply. But in those adverts, they don't explicitly state, even if they apply, what support are those women going to be given? So that we've actually changed, and I've seen calls for these deltas too. They say, we are providing childcare, we are providing flexi time. And there's possibility even for the extension period, recognizing the women needs. So if that doesn't really come out explicit during the advert, why would I even apply when maybe I'm 7 months pregnant? So it's those things that actually really need to spell out when they are putting out the adverts. What support are you going to provide to these women who you are really encouraging to highly apply? Thank you.
We actually need to wrap up now. There's loads of comments coming through. I mean, this is only one step in this journey, which we're doing with WIRES, which HR and the Gender and Diversity and Inclusion function are also engaged with. So the conversation will not stop here. So let me just move on, because we're just can I move? Can I change the slides?
Yes.
No, I can't. Oh, I can, but it's just slow. So yes, what can we do to advance women's career progression? Well, this isn't going to solve everything, but some things that are happening at the moment is please join WIRES if you're not a member already. Become a mentor. Both women and men can be a mentor, so that you can help women who are the mentees in this case in the WIRES mentoring program. You can, if you're a woman, you can join Random Coffee and expand your networks and get to know women from the top to the bottom, from west to east across CGIAR, and just expand your network and share experiences of your work experiences with other women across the network. And as Elizabeth said at the beginning, we've got some women in leadership workshops starting in May, and those are for women and men. So let's start doing these things, but that won't be all. And today, this research was presented by Dr. Millicent Liani, who is one of our own staff. And we don't know if there's other people out there in CGIAR who also have an exciting topic or research to share on the topics around gender and diversity and inclusion, talking about women in research and science. And if you do have something, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us to tell us about it, because we'd love to have more of our own people joining this discussion. And with that, it remains only for me to say thank you so much, Dr. Liani, Millicent. Thank you so much for proposing it, for working with us to put it together. It's been so thought-provoking, so eye-opening, and part of this really important conversation that we have with WIRES and with Gender and Diversity and Inclusion Function all the time, continually getting better. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jo.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good to see all of you that I have met at Random Coffee also. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye, Millicent. Awesome presentation.
Thank you.